Okay, so now we will go to the panel discussion where we have several questions and we will also take several questions from the chat box. Okay, first, before we move on, I think maybe we can have like slightly 5 seconds to 10 seconds to grasp and to save the information that has been shared by Dr. Beth and also Prof. Ismail, because there are so much information today that we received. It's not only the participants, but also me as the supervisor also learned so much today. Okay, let us ask you one question. What is research? Let's go back to the discussion by both Dean Beth and also Dr. Prof. Ismail. So I ask you one question. What is research? Okay, let's see the most popular definition. Maybe we will look at this when we try to find the definition. So research. So this one, you can take this one from wikis. So you can see that creative and systematic work undertaken to increase knowledge, or there are so many interpretation and definition for research that you can take from the online or from the internet. But the question nowadays, the thing that you need to, for the new student and also for the current candidates, okay, you are not searching for answer, but you are researching the answer to the problem in hand. So that's the first thing that you have to remember. So you need to save that in mind. Okay? Remember one more thing, like what being highlighted by Dean Beth as well as Prof. Ismail. It's not a new problem or issue, but a recurring or the persistent one. Okay? Persistent one. So we need to understand that this problem is not new to us. So maybe there are solutions in the previous, had been done by the previous researchers. There are empirical evidence or empirical statistics to support about the claim. So somehow, that's, okay. And so the another question is why people do research when answer had been provided. So you can refer to the presentation by Dr. Beth and also Prof. Ismail, where both of them had covered on this. Because most of the time, why we do research is because of the limitation or lacking. Lacking of what? Because of this progress of the society, of the social progress from the previous era until now. Then you can see the progress had made maybe the technological change, maybe the societal change. Okay, and that's why when we do research, so we have to use lots of redefinition, for example, renewed interest. So we want to inject a fresh or new element in the research. Move on. Okay, so when you want to set the direction of the postgraduate studies, so I would like Prof. Ismail as well as Dr. Beth, maybe we can discuss on this. So there are several ways the students will start off when they want to kickstart their PhD journey. They start off from reading or gathering academic articles, because you want to be a philosopher, so you have to read a lot. Okay, and then try to find the variables in the theoretical framework. Just now we saw several questions on the theory, how many theories that we have to put in the problem statement. And maybe you can also look at industry report or industry outlook. And also just now, Prof. Ismail mentioned suggestion from supervisor, which I think he said that he does not fancy that. Okay, maybe we can hear from Prof. Ismail. What do you think about this, Prof? Prof. Ismail?
I think my microphone was mute. Yeah. So I was asking whether it is the suggestion from supervisor that you are asking about, or the whole issue of
the whole setting.
Set direction. Yes. Yeah. So as I said, there are several sources of ideas regarding your potential topic or your potential problem. And so it is important that once you have an idea, either through exposure or through experience, you have to read more on the issue. And that is where you have to make reference to the literature. You have to do a literature search, because as you rightly pointed out, there is no new idea under the sun. Others have conducted similar studies in the past, but because there are still some unanswered questions, because certain things might have changed. For instance, we are in a COVID-19 era, and we are saying we are in a new normal. Certain things have changed. You cannot resolve 21st century problems with 20th century solutions. And so there is the need for you to read the literature, identify the gaps, and hopefully you'll be able to also identify certain theories within which you can frame your study. So the theoretical framework is also very important, because the theories will have to be tested, and the theories will help you to organize your work. And so once you do that, it is also important that realistically, you also talk to industry players. If the topic has to do with a particular industry, you may have to do some kind of reconnaissance, talk to people and try to identify the situation as it exists on the ground. Now, your supervisor will come in to guide you and not really to suggest a topic for you, unless in a situation where the supervisor has been able to secure funding for a project and wants you to be part of that project. That one, you know that the topic is clearly cut out for you. But in a situation where you are coming with your own ideas, the role of the supervisor is to help you to properly frame the problem and also to make your topic more researchable. So that is what I would say.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Because you mentioned just now on the COVID-19, if let's say we ask the student, the candidate, the PhD candidate, you have to read the recent article, because usually we say about the recent, you don't have to refer to the obsolete article. But now when the students refer to the recent articles, so most of the articles covered on this COVID-19, and especially like this morning, I remember I participated in one webinar, and one of the questions asked on this virtual tourism. So they said, can it be, can it be adapted in this tourism? Because when we have virtual mall, we have virtual shopping. So they want to bring that idea to this tourism industry. So can we say that we still have to refer to the old ideas, or maybe we can change to slightly new ideas in formulating the problem? What do you think about this, Dr. Beck?
I think for most of these innovations, this has been proposed also in the past. Like, for example, augmented reality, virtual tour guiding, virtual experiences, for example, in different destinations. This has been proposed in the past. However, it has been accelerated into something more feasible given the new situation. And so I think a lot of studies are focused into strengthening all of these positive responses, because we have this current situation. There has been a lot of proposal in the past about, for example, virtual tour guiding and virtual experiences, going to different places virtually without leaving your own workplace. But now, since there has been a lot of restrictions, we're opening up these innovations in a more accelerated manner. We cannot already disregard all of this, and so the focus would still be on that direction, because technology nowadays would play a very critical role on how we do things, especially on how we conduct our researches. Now, also, in terms of gathering, I think I saw one question in the chat box regarding gathering of data. It's going to be a lot more challenging, for example, to conduct focus group discussions on a face-to-face manner. And so we have to do it in a more innovative way, using whatever resources is available. And so I think we also have to reshape the way we accept research nowadays. We never used to rely so much on secondary data, like the use of the internet in terms of getting or floating our instruments. Quantitative measures should always be supported by qualitative face-to-face interactions. But now we have to reshape it and then give more allowances, because we have to set a direction towards what we have and what we do not have. So I think that is my take on that.
Okay, thanks for the feedback. Okay, let us move on to the next one. Okay, so let us see this one. So how do you approach research? How do you approach postgraduate studies? So this one is the advice to the potential students. So should the potential students, potential candidates, have this kind of attitude, so clean slate, meaning that they have fresh ideas. So they started fresh. They started from zero knowledge to reading and analyzing previous findings to get ideas of research problems. So just now you mentioned about you do research, but this one trying to be different. So meaning that you set yourself to be zero knowledge or predetermined outcome. So some students, they have this idea in mind. So they have preconceived ideas or predetermined outcome of what the future industry outlook, especially during this COVID-19. For example, like examining the flaws from the previous frameworks and add additional variables. So I think this one is one of the popular style of formulating the problems. And then replication of studies. And I'm sure just now, Prof. Ismail mentioned about this, where you replicate taking established variables or frameworks in other field of studies and to test it in the hospitality and tourism. Like I mentioned to you just now, where we usually have common or generic knowledge from other field of studies. So that's why we try to take it and bring it to tourism and hospitality. Okay, for example, so that's why should it be like problem-based? So discover problem based on the technical reviews. So because you approach your PhD study or postgraduate studies with this zero knowledge, so you try to discover new problems. And usually you try to propose new perspective, then embark on or engage in the qualitative study. Okay, next one. So let's us focus on these two. And objective based. So usually the students have the objective in mind. So they set the objective in the initial stage. So not after you do the technical reviews, then you set the objective. You set the objective first. And usually when we say that, they want to do this modeling, covariance based. Okay, so I'd like to ask both of you. First, Prof. Ismail, your think about this. So these three, which one you think better or which you feel that the student should adopt? Please.
Well, I wouldn't say one is better, than the other.
Yeah.
In any case, you would come across students who fit into all three categories. There are students who come with a clean slate. There are other students who come probably during their undergraduate studies, they may have done some study which they want to build upon. So it's clear that at any point in time, you are likely to come across students who will fit into all the three categories. And I think that it is the duty of the supervisor to guide the student so that in as much as the student may have come with certain preconceived ideas, the question we should ask is whether the topic is researchable, whether it is relevant, whether it is going to contribute to the existing body of knowledge. The supervisor has a role to guide the student through that process. It doesn't matter whether it will be a quantitative study or a qualitative study. At the end of the day, we must note that both types or both forms of research have their own strengths and weaknesses. And so, for instance, if you are going to do a study that at the end of the day, you are going to generalize your findings, then qualitative research may not be suitable. And so it depends. You realize that in recent times, we are having a situation where people are now adopting the pragmatic philosophy where they try to fuse both quantitative and qualitative methods, because the quantitative will give you the hard facts, but the qualitative will help you to elaborate on those hard facts. And so I would say that among the three, it depends on what the student is seeking to accomplish, the objective of the study, and also what the supervisor is able to, guide, how the supervisor is able to guide the student to ensure that the research that is being done is sound and it is appropriate. So I think that yes, you have students who would, fit into all the three categories.
Okay.
It is the end result that matters, yes.
Can we hear from Dr. Beth? Your take about
Yes,
it?
Dr. Rasif. I think it would be challenging to fit all of these three with one student. It would depend on their capabilities as researchers. It would also depend on the direction of their research topic, whether it could be fit for starting it on a clean slate or using a predetermined outcome, or they can take on a replication of a previous study. It would also be under the responsibility of the supervisor or the advisor to properly guide the candidate whether which one would be more appropriate based from the determined or the study, the research topic that was preconceived. Sometimes it would cross between one or two. However, I think choosing which one would be more appropriate is a challenge because there's no single fit for a single person, because it would also operate on different topics, different scope, different resources, and again, different capabilities. Again, this would also border on the type of ethical review process that they would have to pass through. Like for some of the institutions, they do not want, for example, a topic to be very predictive. For some, they also do not want a replication of a study. Like I presented a while ago, in terms of location, in terms of the time, in terms of aspect, trying to tweak it. I know that it is acceptable for a lot of institutions, but there are some institutions who would want a study that would be starting from scratch. And so again, we go back to the first tip, that you have to be able to determine also the requirements. You have to think of the processes with the end in mind, how you'll be able to finish it seamlessly. So I think those are some inputs that I can share.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let us go to next discussion. Limitation of the previous findings. So we mentioned about this. So I think all of us agree that we start research because of the limitation, because of the lacking of the previous findings, debatable findings, or flaws in the previous findings. Okay, so there are several things. Maybe we can add more. For example, like we want to understand the magnitude of the problems, because the problem had been covered before this previously, but required sophisticated modeling or wider input, or maybe scope of study. Some candidates start research by having the scope in mind. So they want to study on different unit of analysis. So this one is more on replication. So you mentioned just now, Dr. Bat, sorry, not Dr. Bat, I think Prof. Ismail, about the different market or different region. So replicate the study and try to test in different market or region. Or methodology. So argue on the methodology and propose better method, sampling and analysis. Or progress of technology and people to test the same model or inquiry to the recent era, and also to focus on one segment or try to do niche area to combine several established findings into one model. So at the end of the day, the most important thing here is to add to the new body of knowledge. So in the injection of the new element, definition of variables. So can we say anything that you want to add, Prof. Ismail, regarding this limitation? So we want to focus on the word limitation and lacking of the previous findings.
Yes, first of all, we need to understand that without a thorough review of the available literature, it will be difficult for the students to identify the limitations. And so more often than not, I always advise students that before you write your problem statement, make sure that you have acquainted yourself with the literature. If you don't know the literature, how can you point out the various gaps or weaknesses in the literature? So it is important that, yes, and for doctoral studies especially, you realize that the candidate has to come out with some original, results, something that will not only reflect what is already existing, but something new And therefore, in order for you to establish that originality, it is important for you to point out the gaps in the literature and indicate how your study is going to help to fill those gaps. And so it could be an issue of even the scope of the study. Maybe previous studies adopted a narrower scope, or the methodology was not sound. Probably the findings cannot be generalized because of the methods that were employed, and so on and so forth. So yes, the limitation of previous studies should be the basis and the foundation for our own research.
Yeah, thank you. Beth, what do you think about this? The word limitation or lacking?
Yes, I think we have to again look back at the fringe or the further research is needed. That would basically tell us the gaps that were not done, were not answered in the previous studies. Readings is going to be very, very critical because the literatures and studies that you'll be reading, even prior you embark on any research activity, would provide as the backbone of your study. Without good readings, you will not be able to understand what you're trying to research on. You have to look at a different lens on how you will be able to approach your own research problem statements, and then try to compare it with the existing or what has been done, and then try to create a matrix on the things that were accomplished, what would be the contrasting and the similar features, and from there you can already formulate something on how you will be able to forecast some of the things that you would like to do as part of the process. Now again, towards the end of the research, you have to be able to come up with something valuable to add to knowledge. I think that's a very important and critical factor here, because if you will just be repeating what has been done, then that means the paper doesn't have that much of a work, because it's just a restatement of what has been done, especially if there are no landmark differences. It could be more valuable, for example, if you can strengthen what has been found out to be true or not. You have to create some sense of novelty also in your paper for us to for the readers to have a very strong interest. Otherwise, it would feel like, oh, that has been done before. Like what many topics that we've been reading, it seems that they have been oversubscribed already. Like when you talk about customer preference, perception studies, those have been done repeatedly. And so what would set your study apart or different? So you have to identify the gaps, and you can only achieve that by extensively reading the literature and studies head on.
Yeah, so because the generation nowadays, they are more straightforward. So they want to see the result, the end result. So they want to see, they are more objective. So just now, both of you mentioned about more reading needed. Okay, what is important? I think this one is more like a silly question. Which one is better? The more you read or the more you cite? So which one, if let's say you have to advise a student, Prof. Ismail, which one will you say to the student?
The more you read or the more you
citation. Cite, yes.
Citation, yes.
Yeah, cite.
I know why you are asking that question. There is the tendency for students to just cite without really reading to understand the input of the literature. So I would say that you have to read. For me, that is more important than citing. Because once you read and you are able to grasp what the issues are, you are able to even write better. Other than that, you just be doing cut and paste. And these days, when your work is subjected to originality test, you may be found wanting. So I would say that try and read and understand so that you can even paraphrase and write things in your own words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dr. Beth, because some students say, they say that I read a lot of articles, but I don't understand any of them. So they say that it's better for me to just simply cite it. Okay, what do you think?
I think that's very dangerous. I wouldn't recommend to cite more if you have not read and if you have not understand what you have read altogether. I think it's very important for you to establish a sense of cohesiveness on how you'll be able to make use of these readings. You have to be able to synthesize everything and try to only get substantial information, only cite really relevant studies in the literature, for you not to be able to confuse your readers. Sometimes you end up also confusing yourselves if you have a lot of things that are not necessary. I know of some universities or institutions that would require a fixed number of readings for their students, or the fixed number of citations, like they would require you to get 100 citations, 50 citations, for example. But again, those numbers would become meaningless if it is not well integrated in your research study. If it's not synthesized properly, and if you write it without fluidity, I don't think it's going to be very valuable as part of your paper. So it's not just about citing, making sure you understand each of the aspects that you put into your paper, making sure that it's relevant or significant, and then synthesizing it properly.
Yeah, thank you. So before we end the discussion, let us take several questions from chat box. So the first question that I think passed through my screen right now is one question from Prof. EA. In line with the 21st century solution making, in our case high modern, if not postmodern, times, could we also expect research to shift to postmodernism paradigms too? So what do you think about this, Prof. Ismail?
Please, can you repeat the question for me?
Okay, I repeat. In line with the 21st century solution making, so in our case, high modern, if not postmodernism times, could we also expect research to shift to postmodernism paradigms too? So because you know, so we have the conventional, so we have the modernism and also postmodernism, and maybe in the future we have another term to call it after post-COVID-19. We are not sure yet what will happen in the future. So there are so many terms coined by the industry players or also the researcher or professors. So what do you think? What is your take about this?
Yes, I think to a very large extent, you realize that research in itself has evolved. I mean, now we are even talking about online questionnaires and ethnographic approach to research and all that. So I think that yes, certain things will change, and indeed they have changed. But we also have to bear in mind that for research to be credible, there are certain basic things that we have to observe as scientists, okay? And so even though we are in a COVID era, and probably we'll even get to a post-COVID era, modernism and postmodernism and all that, I want to believe that the basic tenets of research should be upheld. But then the methods, yes, the methods would vary with time. And so, yes, the way we used to conduct research in the 20th century, in the 19th century, you realize that certain things have changed, even in terms of data analysis. Now we are talking about structural equation modeling and all that. And so, yes, I think certain things will change, but the basic foundation of science, I think that one we will have to guard it jealously if we want our research to be credible.
Okay, thanks. So another question, how many theories to be put in the theoretical framework? So what is the standard? So this one I would like to ask, I want to direct this question to Dr. Beth.
How many theories should you put
in the theoretical framework, and what is the standard? I think maybe before he can, this student can really have the theoretical framework, so we say that how many theories that he or she has to review.
Okay. I would say that there's an unlimited way on how you could read different theories related to your study. There's no specific ruling limiting you to have your readings. I always go back on that because you won't put something in your paper that is not appropriate. You're not going to put, for example, just for the put of just for the sake of putting more theories in your paper without any connection to your study. And so I would still rely on what is appropriate and what is useful. How are you going to connect it with your conceptual framework? I've seen a lot of paper wherein they could have as many as 5 theoretical frameworks. And however, if you try to look at it and read it intently, not all of those would have bearing in the paper. And so we're not looking again at the numbers on how many, although for some institutions, they have certain requirements. I don't know what's the basis of that, but you have to be able to be more precise on how you're going to make use of these theories. How are you going to connect it for you to be able to come up with a good conceptual framework also? And so not on the numbers, but on the appropriateness of the theories that you put. Sometimes one is enough. It's strong enough, and that's really highly significant for the study. And then there's no other theories that would be more appropriate, and it's not reputable, and it's something that cannot be refuted. So I think 1 could be enough. 2 could be good. 3 could be good, for as long as you have a good way of justifying why it's there in your paper, not just by populating the numbers of theories.
Okay, so that does not mean that 1 is good, 1 is good, 2 is better. No, right? It's like it depends on the magnitude of the problems, right, Dr. Ben?
Yes, exactly, Dr. Rasid.
Okay. Next question. So this one is interesting question. It's so like a recent one to the discussion that we have right now. So as the coronavirus pandemic continues to evolve, our collective safety depends on finding creative ways to do our research digitally. So meaning we have to do like remote research or remote supervising, remote study. What are the ways or tips to adapt research in the new normal? To Prof. Ishmael.
Yes, we all agree that we are not in normal times, and therefore we have to adapt to the new normal. Yes, for me, the student, it means that a lot of responsibility will fall on the student, who is usually far away from the supervisor. And as supervisors, we also know that having a face-to-face interaction with your student is not the same as remote learning, where the student will email you his or her work, and then you have to take pains to read through on the screen and then get feedback. I think that in order for us to make this more effective, we have to adopt different strategies. Students themselves should take the bull by the horn. They should have their own plan, and they should sort of discuss these plans with their supervisors. There should be scheduled meetings between supervisors and students instead of students being isolated. Students should ask their supervisors the platforms that are most suitable for them to interact, whether by WhatsApp or by WeChat or whatever. We have to decide on that, or even by email. But there should be constant interaction between students and then their supervisors. Now for the students, this also has implications for the way we go about collecting our data. Because in most countries, there are restrictions, and it is almost impossible for students to go out there and collect primary data. Yeah. So as much as possible, we'll have to resort to online means of data collection, the online questionnaires that we can use SurveyMonkey or Google Documents. We know it has its own challenges, but what else can we do? We have to manage the situation. And then we can also resort to secondary data. We can resort to secondary data which already exist in some form, and then we try to analyze and then make meaning out of it. The other option is not acceptable to some institutions, and that has to do with a systematic review, because for PhD especially, it is required that you be as original as possible. It is expected that you would, come out with something original. But if you do a better or a proper systematic review, it is also possible for you to come out with something original. And so I think that the problem is where a student's proposal has gone through ethical review and has been approved, and he or she is supposed to execute it in a certain format. Then all of a sudden there is COVID-19 and certain things have to change. In some institutions, it will require that the student submits another proposal, which will be subjected to another round of ethical review. And I think that could delay the whole process. So I think that we should adopt the online, approaches to interacting with our students and also data collection. And then supervisors should also guide the supervisees as to how best they can access information online, especially the literature, the various sources available. We should try and share it with them. I know for some universities, students, once they are admitted, they are given passwords and usernames, and they can enter into Elsevier and other databases and collect any literature that they want. But in some institutions, too, students are limited. So the supervisors will have to guide them. We must do everything possible to, arrest the problem of isolation, which has heightened with the outbreak of the COVID-19. And so these are some of my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe we can take the final question from the chat box. I believe the most common problem of research is the alignment of the theoretical framework, conceptual framework, and the research objective. This is where we normally encounter failure among researchers in the graduate school. May we ask the resource person on how we can combat this? It's not only combat the COVID-19, but now to combat this confusion. Dean Beth.
Yes, Dr. Rasif, I think I already replied to the person who asked that question. Okay. In total agreement, 100% agree that that is really also some of the dilemma that we've been encountering, especially when we're sitting down as a panel. Most of these elements are disconnected. And if this is disconnected, then ultimately the study will be flawed. And so how do we arrest this situation early on? I think the very role of the advisor, the supervisor, the mentor is very critical here. We have to be able to ensure that all of these elements are in alignment with each other. As soon as you formulate the research questions, you try to write your conceptual framework, formulate your theories, etc. So this should be in alignment. It should be, it's not a standalone piece. It has to complement each other. It has to more or less find a cohesive way so that it finds its connectedness in terms of putting together total package of your study. One way to do this is by using a matrix. When you do the matrix, you try to, for example, identify your statements, your research problem statements, your objectives, and then from there you try to identify also in another column, related literature or studies in relation to the formulated statements or questions or objectives. And then at the same time, you try to identify also the appropriate theories in relation to that, as well as the conceptual framework. You cannot really put all of this together in one sitting. As you know, research is all about discovery. It is a long journey, and you cannot really try to put things together in a snap. And so even if you try to do it on your own, I think a second person or a third person will be best in trying to make a good judge of your work, and then ultimately before it reached the hands of the panelists. Again, if all of these elements are disconnected, they're not aligned, I think the value of the paper will ultimately diminish. And so you have to be able to construct a matrix, or for example, a map of your literature, of your readings, for you to ensure that only important elements related to your paper will be included. Otherwise, all the non-essentials will be there, and then you lose, the juice or the greater value of the paper. Cohesiveness, fluidity, and alignment, greater focus, those are really very important elements altogether.
Okay, so I think that will be the
Dr.
final
Maud,
question. Okay,
I
you want to add?
wanted,
Okay, please, Prof.
yes, I just wanted to add to what Dr. Beth has said. And I also think that, yes, the connection should be among the key, components of your work, as I did in my presentation. So right from the problem formulation, there should be that connection. The problem, your objectives, hypothesis, your theoretical framework, conceptual framework, your methods of data collection and your methods of data analysis. There should be that clear link among these key issues. And I think one way of ensuring that is when we take the proposal very serious, because all these elements have to be clearly spelled out in your proposal. And so advisors or supervisors are expected to thoroughly review the proposal and make the necessary inputs and suggestions that will ensure that all these elements are in sync. Thank you very much.
Okay, so
Dr. Rasif, if one last thing, I think it's for the panel. I think it's more important to really critique the proposal and then try to really identify some of the opportunities for improvement, because when you miss that chance or opportunity, chances are the candidate or the researcher will proceed in writing his paper, and if the elements are disconnected starting from the formulation of the research problems, objectives, etc., I think altogether it's going to be very challenging to correct, and then at the worst, there could be a use for a major overhaul. So the sooner we can correct that during the proposal stage, I think that's what Dr. Ishmael is trying to point out, is I think that's going to be better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we see here both of the panelists have lots to say. So like 2 hours to very short for today's session. Okay, maybe we can have just one final words from both of you. Let's start from Dr. Beth. Any final words to the students, to the candidates, to the potential candidates, or to the current candidate?
Well, I think you're getting a lot of very good inputs from your research mentors. My final word is, of course, just to keep the faith, and then do not stop aiming until you reach the finish line. And it's not going to be an easy journey for all of us, for all of you, but with your strong passion and determination, I'm sure you'll be able to achieve that objective of finishing your master's and your dissertations, graduating, and then taking on that degree and using it to full benefits. And again, passing forward all the help and the support that you were able to get or to gather when you were studying. Passing it forward.
Okay,
that's it.
Thank you. Final word from you, Prof. Ishmael, please.
So thank you once again for the opportunity to share with our postgraduate students. And personally, I have also learned a lot from this interaction. And I hope that the candidates, the PhD candidates and master students would learn from what has been presented. For me, it is important that we plan ahead of time. And in planning, let's make sure that we prepare ourselves. The proposal, we have to read, we have to learn. We have to learn from those who have successfully completed their PhDs, not only our supervisors. We can even learn from our peers and other, social networks. We can learn from them. And so I hope that what has been learned here this afternoon or this morning will be put to the text, and that the students will go the extra mile and make sure that they put their work in good, standing, and they will make sure that they set the pace from what they have learned. They are going to put it to practice, so that at the end of the day, when they are confronted with certain problems, they can look back at what we have taught them this morning and then try to manage the situation. Thank you all for coming.